Hello and welcome to Non-Boring History. I'm Annette Laing, and today I'm delighted to welcome Dr. Kevin Shirley to our program. He's a professor of medieval history and department chair at LaGrange College, which is a small liberal arts college in LaGrange in the western part of Georgia. He's taught there for nearly 25 years. He holds a PhD in medieval and Renaissance history from Florida State University, and he is also co-coordinator of the National History Day program in Georgia. So what we're going to talk about is what is National History Day and a little bit about Kevin's role in it and just answer some questions about it. So welcome, Kevin.
Well, thank you, Annette. I'm thrilled to be here. It's great to see you and to get a chance to chat. You know me, I'm always thrilled when I get a chance to talk History Day.
You bet. Absolutely. Kevin, I'm going to assume that a lot of my readers and viewers are not familiar with History Day. So what's it for? Could you sum up for us what it is, what it does?
Absolutely. National History Day is actually a program. It's what I call kind of a co-curricular program. It's a program that's designed to engage students in grades 6 through 12, right? Middle school and high school students, grades 6 through 12, in the discipline of history. And what this program does is it asks students to really, stake a claim of ownership over their work. It's a little bit different. It's different from what you might normally expect to see in a classroom that's a standards-driven kind of classroom, because what National History Day does is it runs alongside those curricular programs, and it says to the student, okay, we're going to set some parameters, we're going to set some framework in place, but you're going to own this work. You're going to own the topic, you're going to do the research, you're going to do the analysis, and you're going to present the findings.
So you have, sorry to interrupt you, but
yeah.
I think a lot of folks don't know quite how all this works, that there is state curriculum in history and social studies, which is a mishmash of history, geography, and several other subjects like economics.
Right.
And then there's what historians do.
Right.
And so History Day, is it fair to say, is a glimpse into what historians do?
It absolutely is. I mean, and I refer to the students who are doing History Day projects as historians, because they are literally embarking upon an adventure in the discipline, right? And they're approaching questions historically. They're approaching their work using the methodologies that we use, the approach that we use, the way in which we ask questions of source materials. We're asking those students, some of whom are at the ripe old age of 11, to actually try to do that, right? And to be honest with you, Annette, I think that's where the power of the program lies, is that it gives those students the freedom to dig in and to embark on the adventure, not necessarily as students trying to learn X number of factoids for an exam, but to really engage in the discipline of history. And it's been around since the mid-1970s, It was born in Cleveland, Ohio, right? It was born in Cleveland, Ohio back in the mid-70s at Case Western Reserve University. So it's really grown. It's a program that's nationwide, it's global, and about 500,000 students per year across the country and around the world do History Day projects.
So they get to pick their own subjects.
Yeah,
to do this, right?
So what happens is there's a national organization. There's a structure to National History Day, and the national office selects a theme every year. So, for instance, for the 22-23 academic year, the theme was Frontiers in History: People, Places, Ideas, right? And you notice that theme is a really big umbrella kind of thing. Right?
Huge,
big concepts, big, wide open framing. And that's all intentional, because what that allows a student to do is to think about topics that interest them, right? That can fit under the umbrella of the theme. And so the theme is very big and it's very broad. And, there are topics that when you think about it, right, you play with it a little bit, there are topics that you can basically fit underneath any one of these thematic umbrellas.
Right. So they pick a subject,
Yes.
they research it,
Yes.
and then on at the state level, I guess it's a local level first, right? They bring their projects to be judged. And what different formats can they work in?
Yeah, I think it's another strength of National History Day. So when a student goes through all this work and they do this research and they collect this material and they do this analysis and they build this argument, then they got to decide, as if that wasn't enough to ask a middle schooler to do, then they got to decide how you want to present the work. Well, in History Day, you can present your work through one of 5 different forms of media, right? In History Day, they're called categories. So a student can write a paper, and that's very much a traditional kind of historical paper. A student can build an exhibit, right? And I know the first thing you think of is the trifold 36-inch exhibit thing, but I'm here to tell you that kids can get really creative with this. I've seen exhibits that were the shape of rockets, right? I mean, you can really go with this.
So kind of like a science fair exhibit.
Absolutely. I mean, it absolutely can be like that, right? I mean, it's been crazy, some of the things. The kids are really, really creative, and that encourages that. So you can write a paper, you can do an exhibit, you can build a website, or you literally build a website. I mean, National History Day has a website building platform that kids can create an account. There's no charge, you're off and you're running. You can produce a documentary film, right? So if you're into that, you produce your film, or you can do a performance. So, you know, you're going to do this work, you're going to select that topic, you're going to do the research on it, you're going to draw those conclusions, and then you're going to figure out, okay, well, how is it that I want to present the work? And it's that, and again, it's about that kind of ownership, because what you notice here, as you and I are talking, Annette, is that from the very beginning of this, students are having to make decisions and choices, and they're having to take that stake of ownership over the work. And then, yes, they can enter that work at a school level competition, and then from a school level competition, it'll go to a regional, and then from a regional, it'll go to a state, and then, you know, the top 2 at the state in all of those different categories are actually going to wind up in June. This summer, we'll wind up at the University of Maryland in College Park. They'll go to DC for the national contest. Oh. So, you know, for me, you know, for the kids, they're thinking about the contest and they're thinking about, oh, I get to go to DC. But for me, when I think of National History Day and what really gives it its power, it's this notion of ownership. And
it's really so, I mean, the word I hear an awful lot in social studies education circles, and, you know, something I talk about in BH, and I'm talking about it more, is that historians in general, we're not often included in that discussion at the state level, at the development of curriculum. So the word I keep hearing is aligned. Everything has to be, that happens in the classroom has to be aligned to curriculum. Everything that the kids read has to be aligned. And never is the question asked, what are actually the kids interested in? And that's left to the teachers who, you know, this is I take my hats off. I don't know how they do this, quite frankly.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, you know, right. But what I hear about, and I know about, because full disclosure, I've judged National History Day since I was, or one of the history days since I was an undergraduate, on and off over the years. But what you know, it's you're allowing the kids to discover their interests and align all their effort to what captures their passions. And is it always what they, you know, from what you can gather, do they end up doing subjects that they understood at the beginning they would be interested in, or do they sometimes just discover a whole new interest?
No, I think it's very much the latter. I think you know, it's one of the great challenges for students, particularly younger students, to figure out a topic. I mean, just think about what goes on intellectually and in a young brain as you're trying to think about, you know, what does the word frontier mean in the context of an idea or of a person or a group of people, and how do I play with that, and what am I interested in, and what are the recommendations that my teacher or my parents or the media specialist is giving me, and how do I pull this all together? And time and again, Annette, these students will come and they'll sit down with you, and they will tell you that they're at a place now at the end of the process that they didn't even imagine they were going to be at the beginning.
Wow.
Right. And so absolutely, it is for these kids a journey of discovery. And here's the thing, it's a journey of discovery unlike any other journey that they have been on in their lives so far.
Is the goal to, and I'm clearly playing devil's advocate here, but is the goal, I'm so leading,
no, Annette, you're not.
I am. But I mean, is the goal to breed more historians? So I shouldn't ask you while you're taking a swig of water. No,
not at all. Exactly. That's the thing. That's really the thing about History Day that I think my colleagues perhaps don't get. Right. So they see, oh, you're running National History Day. You're doing this national. So this is all about history majors. 99% of the students, 99.5% of the students who do History Day projects have no interest whatsoever in being a historian. All right, let's just get that on the table, right? They're going to be engineers, they're going to be doctors, they're going to be, they're going to do whatever it is they're going to do. They are not biting at the bit at the age 11 to be a historian. They're just not going to do it. But here's the really cool thing is that we call it history education. You go to the national website and they're going to talk about history education. But really and truly, Annette, you know what this is. This is skills development. This is filling up that toolbox, right? It's social and emotional learning. It's helping young people to come to believe that they are capable, that they can do it, that they can. It doesn't matter how alien the skills may seem, those are skills that can apply across whatever it is that they're going to do, and that they can develop the ability and the capacity to apply those skills, and they can sharpen those skills, and they can succeed. Right.
And including and learning.
Exactly.
Just the skill of reading and learning for yourself. People tend to think that education is a finite thing. I did my education at such and such college. I am now educated. And it's never meant to be that. It was always meant to be here you go, off you go.
Got that piece of paper on the wall, Dad,
Yeah, go find some context for your life that makes sense to you. And history hopefully is part of that. So really giving the kids that opportunity to develop context, which, as you said, 11 years old, you don't have a whole heck of a lot of.
That's right. That's right.
That's fabulous, isn't it?
And it's remarkable, Annette, because you've heard this, right? You've engaged History Day students before, so you know what happens. They come back years later, right? They come back years later and they say to you, I did that when I was in 8th grade. I was 13. And then all of a sudden I got to my junior year in high school and my freshman year in college, and I found myself kind of, dusting off and opening up that file folder again, because there were these skills. There were these things that I had to do in 8th grade for a History Day project that, oh, by golly, I can do here and I can do there and I can do again and again. And then before you know it, they come back and they say, you know what? I've been able to apply those skills and use those skills that are rooted in my History Day project in 7th grade, in my job and in my life. And it is not an exaggeration to say that we have had History Day alumni come back and say that to us.
No, I absolutely know you're right about this. That and I think it's a constant source of sadness and frustration to me that history in schools is not developed by historians. Let's just come out and say it. I've known historians who've been used as window dressing in developing curriculum, that this sort of stuff comes under the purview of colleges of education, and it really shouldn't, because, oftentimes what kids experience at History Day, they may never meet again. If they test out of college history using AP, frankly, I don't think I know many historians who do think that AP is in any way equivalent to college education. So they don't encounter it, or if they do, then you just have to hope, because like any profession, there's people who are fantastic in the classroom, you know, there's people who are perfectly fine, and there's people who suck, you know, and so you just have to hope that they get one of the people who really reaches them somehow to understand this. It's not about having got the marks on the test. It's much more relevant. I mean, you know, one of the things that another thing I don't think most of the public is aware of, and unless this has changed in the past 2 years, which I hope it hasn't, is if you look at the top engineering programs in the country, places like MIT and Caltech, they require their engineering students to take the equivalent of one humanities class every semester. Because if you don't understand history, how it works, how things change, you cannot understand how engineering works or the history of science in general. So, you know, we're watching history be in big trouble right now, and trying to get across this message. It is not irrelevant. It is not pointless. And I think, you know, I think my viewers and readers, the reason that they are my viewers and readers is because they figured this one out. You know, it matters. So with a History Day, gotta ask. I do. It's an awkward question.
Go ahead, just ask it. Go for it. Ask the question.
Yes. Do you see, you know, these are kids without much context, right? Don't know much when they start. Do you see some subjects that come up again and again and again and again?
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Tell me.
Well, you see, this is the thing. Remember, we talked about the big umbrella of the theme here about, you know, 5 minutes ago. Yeah, what that means is that if a student thinks about it, they can pretty much take any topic and work it in. So, you know, here in Georgia, one of the famous topics that we all have a chuckle about that appears 300,000 times every year is Jackie Robinson, right? Jackie Robinson and the integration of professional baseball. Now, let's think about that for a moment. How many Jackie Robinson projects under the umbrella of Frontiers in History do you think we're going to have this year?
Oh, zillions.
Right? A zillion. That's exactly right. We're going to have a zillion of them. So, you know, so absolutely, you know, and when you think about a theme, right? And you think about who you're working with, right?
Right.
We're talking about young people who are trying to figure these things out. So Frontier, you know, they're thinking space. So how many hundred of thousand of bazillion NASA Apollo 11, Apollo 13 projects are we going to get, right? Because, well, space, the final frontier, you know, that's what Jim Kirk says. So, I mean, that's what we got to go with. And you know what? Here's the thing. That's okay. That's perfectly fine. Because, all right, so as History Day judges and as History Day people, we may have looked at 300 bazillion Jackie Robinson projects. Yeah. But for that student who did a Jackie Robinson project and thought about Jackie Robinson's life through the prism of frontiers in history and what that means, that is the first time that student grappled with all of those complexities. And by golly, Annette, that's the win. Doesn't matter how many times we've seen Jackie Robinson projects, right? It's that student who grapples with Jackie's life and legacy for the first time and what that means.
And none of these subjects, you know, for me, by the way, it's the Salem witch trials, because I'm a colonialist. And my dissertation advisor was Richard Godbeer, who's Mr. Salem witch trials. So it's, you know, it's a hard one for me to judge because I try not to expect too much, you know. Gotcha. But yeah, absolutely, it's new to them, and that's what matters. And the depth. You know, one of the things that I know frustrates teachers that they share with me, and that frankly, I'm, you know, having been educated in the UK, I'm gobsmacked by, I still am after 40 years. And that is the attempt to cover everything, because if you don't understand everything, you won't understand anything. Well, that's rubbish. And what you end up is covering nothing, because you're racing through these subjects in ways that require you to focus on factoids, as you said, names, dates, and you never get a real sense of it. It's unengaging. And, you know, I took history in high school in America for the 1 year I was in an American high school. And it was, you know, I mean, it's not to blame that high school. I'm not even naming it because it wasn't their fault. But the lack of depth, the shallowness, the tedium of it was really shocking to me, as was the realization that one of the men who taught me, actually, frankly, two of the men who taught me, knew less about American history than I did. Another beef for another day. But this is a chance, as you say, for the kids to take ownership, to do this kind of in-depth work that really, even if they set out just to win the prize and go to DC, it can't help but affect them. And I think that's just fantastic. I did my own research projects when I was a kid, and did my own history day. My dad bought me a folder full of reproduction documents about Tutankhamun. He'd taken me to see the Tutankhamun exhibit at the British Museum. Unfortunately, when we got there was a queue, went back and forth through a forecast, and right around the building. And my dad looked at me, and I looked at my dad, and it was like, nope. So this was the consolation prize, and I made a museum exhibit.
Wow.
Yeah. So I mean, I was doomed from that day forth. I mean, that's that's the thing you did. It wasn't necessarily that I was going to be a historian. I always wanted to be a journalist.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it.
You're done.
That's not
game over, Annette. That's it. The die is cast.
You got me. Got me at 9 years old or 8 years old or whatever I was.
Great.
So you work under the umbrella of Georgia Humanities,
right?
That it's a joint project between Georgia Humanities and your institution, LaGrange College, running History Day at the state level in Georgia. And by the way, in case you think your ears are fooling you folks elsewhere, Kevin, strangely, like me, is not from Georgia. And yet, he's from Chicago. And yet, we end up teaching in Georgia because it's more complicated than everybody realized. So
another story for another day.
Another story for another day, exactly. You can tell we know each other, can't you? I'm, much less polite when I know someone. You work under the umbrella of Georgia Humanities.
Yes.
So what does their support matter, bearing in mind that a lot of people don't know what Georgia Humanities is? So
Georgia Humanities is an organization that also was, grew out of a community movement in the early 1970s here in Georgia, designed to, to communicate, articulate, preserve, and foster a whole variety of cultural preservation and cultural engagement events across the spectrum. They are an affiliate agency now of the National Endowment for the Humanities. They are an organization that sponsors and encourages cultural, historic, artistic events at all levels of the community in the state. They're headquartered in Atlanta, but their work is not just Atlanta.
No, definitely not.
They provide grants and sponsor museum events and cultural events in large communities and small, urban and rural across the state. They really
supported my work at Georgia Southern with children in Bullock County, Georgia, out in the middle of nowhere.
They're very much interested in trying to tell the story of Georgians and to tell the story of these communities at all levels. And they've been a sponsor of National History Day in Georgia since the early 1990s. I think it was a bit, although I don't know the details, I wasn't in Georgia when it happened, but I think it was one of those things where, Georgia History Day in Georgia was a bit of an orphan. And Georgia Humanities kind of swept in 93 and picked it up, and has been the sponsor of the program ever since. And I had the good fortune, it was really weird, Annette. I mean, I started out, my first experience with History Day in Georgia was as a parent. My kids went to public school here in Troup County, Georgia, and they did History Day. I did not know anything about History Day when I was in graduate school. And so what happened was, over the years, as I watched the power of the program, I saw what it did to my kids. I saw what it was doing to their friends, the kind of change that it was fostering. I became more and more interested in it. And so we at LaGrange College had always hosted a regional contest, one of those levels in the contest.
Sure.
And so when I came on faculty in 98, I see my kids are doing History Day, and then I'm helping Kay Minshew and the folks at the Historical Society put together the contest here on campus. And it just built from there. And by 2011, I wanted to do something more intentional, to be honest with you. History Day participation in Troup County was on the way down, and I wanted to see if there was something that we could do to help. And so that then gave birth to the mentoring program. And at first, the National History Day Georgia mentoring program at LaGrange College was just for Troup County, Annette. It was just, I was just trying to keep the program vibrant by providing support to teachers in Troup County. And then what happened was people across the state heard about it, and it just took off. And since 2014, because of the strength of the mentoring program, since 2014, we've been co-sponsors with Georgia Humanities. So, you know, Georgia Humanities gives us that foundation. They work statewide. They manage our regional structure. They manage our contests. My colleague up there, Jess Alden, is great. And what we're allowed to do, what we get, because they do such a great job up there in terms of the nuts and bolts of History Day, what that allows us to do is to mentor, is to be involved in education, to be involved in teacher training, teacher and student support. That's what we're primarily able to do down here in LaGrange. So we kind of come at it from two different directions.
That's fantastic. I mean, you know, I all my work since I left Georgia Southern has been as a sort of guerrilla historian, you know, kind of getting in where I can, building relationships where I can, modeling how I teach history by doing college lectures for 9-year-olds disguised as entertainment. And I have heard from teachers that it's influenced how they've taught, and I am thrilled. I am thrilled to know that. But your impact is so much bigger, so much broader. And, you know, and everybody can get involved. If people would like to volunteer to judge National History Day, and don't think, oh, I couldn't do that. No, they'll train you. It's fine. It's all good. You get criteria. You'll be fine. In Georgia, would they contact you? Who would they contact? They
can contact me, or they can contact my colleague with Georgia Humanities, Jess Alden. Okay. We're always looking for folks that want to help, and we're always looking for folks that want to judge. You know, when we convene our state contest later this spring, we'll need, and Annette, you know this, you have experience at that level, we'll need 130 judges.
Right.
I mean, literally, we'll need 130 people who are willing to come on a Saturday,
right,
and engage in conversation with students about their work. I mean, and it's a tremendous thing for folks to give up their Saturdays. And we appreciate each and every one of them. And you want to know what? Again, the majority of them are not professional historians. They are not historians. They're just folks that are interested in young people, that are interested in engaging in conversation with students about their work and about their ideas. And that's the only requirement. We'll get you everything else you need. All you got to do.
You really do. And you're right. I mean, it's very few historians doing this, because they're always, I mean, people do not understand this about history professors. They're always overwhelmed, just overwhelmed with whatever it is they do. But I can say as a volunteer that I found it incredibly rewarding to talk to these kids, see their enthusiasm, you know, put them at their ease. And that's a huge part of it, is really, and you'll learn things from them that you didn't know. I mean, I'm a colonialist. What do I know about Jackie Robinson? You know, I mean, it's really a great thing. So if people contact, I will put some contacts with this when I put this out at Non-Boring History. And also, one other question: is judging something that can never be done remotely, or does it need to be done on site? We still have, even though we've gone back to in-person contests this year, we did everything online and remotely during COVID. We are still judging paper category online. Right.
So that's the one category that is exclusively online. The others still, now that we're back in person, the others do have an in-person dimension. But to be honest with you, Annette, one of the things that my colleague Jess Alden and I still have to kind of work through the particulars of is that we have to build in to the contest at the state level now a capacity to meet the needs of those students who cannot attend in person.
Right.
So we haven't figured to be honest with you, we haven't figured all of that out just yet, and now we're going to make that happen. But it is something that we're paying attention to and trying to deal with. But for now, if you wanted to judge in Georgia, but you could only do it virtually, it would be the paper category would be the only one that you'd be able to.
Oh, sure. And I mean, there are regional contests around the state. You don't have to be, in LaGrange or whatever to judge. And if you're not in Georgia, when the likelihood is if you're watching, you're not. This is national, even international. Absolutely. And I will post a link to non-boring history. That's me, Annette. It's been a long day already. I will post a link to NHD, National History Day, and so that way folks can get in touch. Kevin, I hate to cut us off, but we've actually gone over time. What a shock! Two historians going over time. I've never heard of such
I mean, everybody knew that. Two historians in the same room together. You might as well forget your timeline. Just cancel it.
It's done. It's done. It's why Ken Burns doesn't interview us ever. He doesn't like us because we go on and on.
Yeah, it just never stops.
We know what we're talking about, but that doesn't enter into it. Yeah. Any case, so good to talk to you, Kevin. Thanks so much. Thanks for joining me at Non-Boring History today.
Thank you, Annette. I loved it. Great to see you.
Good to see you too.